Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you are a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. The flood of stories that we could talk about continues to grow every single day. I want to begin with a Department of Federal Government which doesn't exist, the Department of Government Efficiency. This artificial creation by Donald Trump, led by Elon Musk and, until a day or two ago, Ramaswamy, has created a real problem because it's not a real department of the government, and yet it is making recommendations. And the Trump administration is moving on those recommendations, whether they are legal or not. Let's talk for a moment about the decision by Donald Trump to put a spending freeze on various programs. Now, let me tell you, I went through this in the Nixon years. There was a law passed in 1974 because Richard Nixon tried to impound certain funds. And the Congress said you can't do it. It was just that simple. Well, Donald Trump is saying, I can do it. I have the authority. I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I'll see you in court, which is his right. But I want to remind everybody that a president of the United States is not a king, that a president has to conform with certain laws. And one of the things that really bothers me is what's going on right now on so many different levels. And let's talk about a few of these. Let's talk about firing Justice Department employees. Why? Well, they're very honest about it because they didn't agree with Donald Trump. And I have to tell you, to fire non-political people who are long-term workers and who are told simply you're gone, well, I think it's wrong. And they're doing it before Pam Bondi is confirmed as Attorney General, because they don't want her to carry that burden. There is clearly a political intent. Let's be clear about this, that we now have an administration that has decided to act in extraordinary situations. I had a discussion yesterday with an individual for whom I have a great deal of respect. And when I raised the question of whether or not Donald Trump was violating the law, his answer was, you've been telling me that for 10 years. We've heard all the things that Donald Trump has done, and yet nothing has happened. Indeed, Donald Trump won re-election, and he won it by a convincing majority. So this is all ridiculous, he said to me. And I want to suggest to you that quite the contrary. When a president violates the law, you have to be aware of it. I spoke to this wonderful individual about Archibald Cox, the man who was the independent counsel during the beginning of the Watergate investigation and who Nixon summarily fired. And of course, the individual I spoke with didn't know who Archibald Cox was, didn't understand the historical precedent. There is something amiss, and we need to understand that. There is something else to report on. As you may have heard, Google has agreed to rename the Gulf of Mexico. They're going to call it now the Gulf of America. And Alaska's highest peak, Denali, is going back to the phrase Mount McKinley. Google has decided to do this. Why? Because of fear, my friends. Because of fear of Donald Trump. Just that simple. And speaking of fear, there is terror and fear in the immigrant community across the country. We've talked about that. We'll talk about it more. But you can be certain that this is, well, very disturbing. And the House Republicans have decided to investigate sanctuary cities. Their intent is to eliminate sanctuary cities, but more than that, to prevent any aid from going to sanctuary cities. This is, again, another fascinating moment which will confront federal power against, frankly, states and municipalities. There is no doubt, according to Stephen Miller, Donald Trump's one of his key aides, that Donald Trump is talking about invoking the Insurrection Act. That's right. Donald Trump and his people, according to Stephen Miller, are talking about invoking the Insurrection Act. I must tell you, when I hear these kinds of things, I am horrified. So I have a question for all of you. It is the same question I posed yesterday to the individual with whom I spoke at length. Should we be afraid? That's right. Should we be afraid of an abuse of presidential power? And the fact is that a lot of people are just dismissing it. Their argument is Donald Trump received a mandate, and therefore he needs to be able to do what he wants to do. Is that the way our system works? In about an hour, because I'm recording before the hearing on Robert F. Kennedy Jr., in about an hour there will be a hearing on the question of confirming Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services. We all know that his first cousin, Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg, wrote a letter and made a statement urging that Bobby Kennedy not be confirmed, calling him a predator, saying his own record proves he's unfit for the job. Indeed, according to Caroline Kennedy, all of Robert Kennedy Jr.'s children have been vaccinated, and yet he has been out there urging people not to receive vaccinations. This is a fascinating moment. I heard the argument that a president should be able to nominate and have confirmed people who he, at this point, wants around him. And theoretically, that makes sense. But there is one slight problem. The Constitution of the United States calls for advise and consent. And we have had situations where people nominated for cabinet positions and other positions have been told no, because the Senate has said no. We will see what happens with Robert Kennedy. But I do want to make a comment about a recently confirmed cabinet official, Pete Hegseth, who is the new Secretary of Defense, who, in line with retribution, which is what Donald Trump is after, has pulled protection from the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley. He's not only pulled protection, they're talking about taking away one of Milley's stars. There is something here which should profoundly disturb every American. Revenge has no place in the American presidency, and enemies lists have no place in the American presidency. And we are going to hear, when the whole question comes up of the man nominated to be the new director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, whether or not any of that matters. Most important, it may be, the question with Kash Patel, is whether or not it will matter to Republicans. Republicans hold the key on all of these nominations. I began with the words that a president is not a king. I repeat them now. We are not just talking about American democracy. We are talking about the balance of powers. We're talking about a potential abuse of power. We are talking about the fact that what Donald Trump has done in the last few days, if the Congress were a free-thinking body, believe me when I tell you, impeachment would be on the table. It's something to think about, something to reflect on, and most assuredly, we will in the days ahead. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which, as I always tell you, is our goal. I also want to make a point that you can interact with me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or by emailing me. I love your comments. And of course, my special appreciation to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast. I'll be back tomorrow around the political world with John Rothman. Who knows where we will be at that point? I can hardly wait. See you then.